Hello and welcome to the Hey Joe Show. I am grateful that you're joining us for this particular episode. Those of you who are joining us live, I want to thank you for that tonight here on Facebook. But those of you who will be tuning in via the podcast links, I want to tell you this much, that we couldn't do it without you. And we want to encourage you to go ahead and tell your friends about it. One of the easiest ways to spread the message about the Hey Joe Show is for you to tell other people why this show is something that they should listen to. And of course, you have been very gracious to us over the years as you have allowed us to be part of your families, allowed us to be part of your discussions with your children. And we just want to say thank you for that. And of course, we started off tonight's show wanting to thank the Light Network.tv for allowing the Hey Joe Show to be a part of that family of podcasts, as well as Truth.fm. And if you haven't checked out either one of those, then we want to encourage you to do that as well. This evening's show, we're going to start off with a study, and I thought it was quite interesting, a study that has circulated over the last, maybe year, not quite a year, but it was a study that was done and admitted to actually by Meta, which is Facebook, right? And Facebook owns Instagram. But it was about the damaging effects of social media on something called body image. Now, I don't know how much you talk about body image. Most of us probably are already aware of what body image is. But basically, it is your way of looking at yourself. And sometimes we are our own worst critics. There's no doubt about that. When you and I, perhaps we look in the mirror, we see those of us maybe who are a little older than we used to be. Maybe we see a few more gray hairs. Maybe we see a few less hair on the head, or maybe we see a few more wrinkles. Maybe we notice that my skin doesn't quite shine like it used to. For those of you who are younger, you're not at the point yet of looking at yourself through the lens of age. But there is something that happens in the life of a young person that literally changes the way their body looks. And that is when Dr. Evil Pituitary Gland kicks in, and this wonderful adventure and this wonderful journey known as puberty starts to occur. And of course, with that are all kinds of bodily changes that come into play. And as that body changes, what happens is people tend to judge their bodies, and sometimes they judge them in a healthy manner, and sometimes they judge them in a very unhealthy manner that actually can lead to mental problems, emotional problems, self-esteem problems, which can flood into other areas. Now, I start off with all of that, and we're going to look at that here in a moment, because that's actually got a name, and I hesitate to even say what the name is, because I'm sure those of you who listen to this who are in the counseling field or psychology field, you might hear this and say, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, here's the reality. The word is body dysmorphic disorder. I hope I said that correct. But that's exactly what this study that came out by Facebook and by Meta, ultimately the company that owns Facebook, or that used to be, we just used to say it was Facebook, and now it's the Meta, right? But they also own Instagram, and I thought it was quite interesting that it wasn't long ago that they conducted a study. And they, at least at this particular time of this writing, Facebook's not necessarily wanting everything out there as far as the impact of Instagram. And of course, those of you who utilize Facebook and those of you who utilize Instagram, you'll know that Instagram is very much so more picture driven, not as focused on the words that people use, although you can put words and captions there with the images. But the major emphasis is on the picture. And it would be in the same vein, maybe for some of you who are a little older, but still involved. Maybe you understand the concept from a Pinterest standpoint, where if you see someone who has created this beautiful house or this beautiful project and they portray themselves as always having it together and never having any problems, that you may look at that and you would say, well, that is what I need to become. I need to become that Pinterest reality. And of course, we've had that discussion. We know that that's not possible. That oftentimes people who will post those things, it's not that they're wanting to mislead necessarily. I say that necessarily. But the idea is this: we stage it, right? Much like you stage a home that you're going to sell. You want to accentuate the best parts, and where you cannot accentuate, you want to hide, maybe with a shadowing or a shading or something like that. Well, you and I both know in the day of social media, in the day of filters, that it is possible to portray an image that isn't exactly what you wake up with every morning. And it doesn't matter how much teeth brushing is done, how much hair washing and combing and styling is done, and it doesn't even matter how much makeup is put on. There are filters that can lighten. There are filters that can soften. There are filters that can even put little stars dancing around your head. And in all of these things, you look at that and you say, Joe, why is that a big deal? Here's why it's a big deal. According to the internal research that was done by Meta or by Facebook or whatever you want to call it, right? This particular article states that Instagram's internal research says this, quote unquote, we make body image issues worse for 1 in 3 teen girls. The tagline, the subline here is Facebook knows the damage Instagram is going to do or is doing to teens' mental health. And of course, you look at that and you say, well, why is that a big deal? Well, it's a big deal because of this. When you are looking at something that isn't real and comparing yourself to that and holding that as your standard, it ends up with disappointment. Now, we've known this for a long time with various ideas. When people portray that their family has it all together, individuals maybe who look at their family personally and compare it with the family online, they say, well, why do they have it all together? Why can't I have it all together? And it makes us feel bad about what we're doing with our family. Now, never mind that what was going on is only being reported because we only report the good stuff. I don't think I ever get on social media where somebody says, my kids were horrible today. I had to ground them. I had to discipline them today, and I could never clean the house. And oh, by the way, I haven't showered in 2 days. I don't know of anybody who says that. What I do know is this, that when we get all dressed up, when we go out, maybe when our house is clean, maybe when that piece of furniture is looking really good, maybe we'll take pictures of that, describe that. We'll put that out there, but we rarely put things out there that would make us look, I'm not going to say bad, but would make us look normal. And that's because, for the most part, normal isn't interesting. At least that's what people think. Now, I would offer this to you. I think normal is interesting. That's why I've thought about that we need to, on our travels across the globe, or across the country rather, as we go about our ministry, I think we need to set up a dashboard cam and create a YouTube channel for the Wells Ventures in the Van, so you can see what it really would be like to travel with Joe and Aaron and the kids as we travel across country. I hope and pray that many of you would still love us after that. No, it's not that bad. It's just funny because you would see a regular picture of who we are, right? And sometimes we're afraid of that. And sometimes we get ideas in our head that who I am is not good enough. And so then we compare ourselves with other people, which only then leads to negativity in our life. That's exactly what this is bringing out about Instagram when it comes to body image. I thought this was interesting. I'll read a few of these that are highlights from this particular study. One study by Facebook of teen Instagram users in the United States and the UK found that more than 40% of those who reported feeling unattractive said the feeling started when using Instagram. Research reviewed by Facebook's top executives, so let me get back to that, concluded that Instagram was engineered toward greater social comparison than rival apps like TikTok and Snapchat. TikTok is more focused on performance and Snapchat on jokey filters that keep the focus on the face. Instagram, by comparison, spotlights users' bodies and lifestyles more often. Another point, teens told Facebook researchers that they felt addicted to Instagram and wanted to check it less often, but didn't have the self-control to rein in their usage. And, of course, this is a quote, teens blame Instagram for increases in the rate of anxiety and depression, said internal research by Facebook that was presented in 2019, and that this reaction was unprompted and consistent across all groups. In other words, it wasn't like they prompted the teenagers to say that, but what the teenagers said was basically, yes, when you develop a platform that at its very core is designed to make us compare ourselves to other people, especially when it comes to bodies, that is going to end up causing problems. Now, that's what I want to talk just very briefly about. And then my goal is tonight to bring us back to some concepts from God's word that would, I pray, be a blessing to you. Because look, we're not going to pretend this is only a teenage issue. That would be disingenuous. There are plenty of moms and plenty of dads who are going to listen to this and tune into this, that you are your own worst critic when it comes to your body. As a matter of fact, you are the one that probably obsesses about the way you look, and you're concerned that other people are obsessing about the way you look, when the reality is you are inside of your own head, is what we used to say growing up. And you've convinced yourselves of some things that are not real. And so I don't want this to be where it's just a teenage concept. I want us to be honest and say, yes, teenagers struggle with this because puberty. And they start at young ages as their bodies are changing and they're comparing themselves not just to other people, not just what they see on social media, but even a societal construct of what a woman's body is supposed to look like or what a man's body is supposed to look like. And if you don't fit that cookie cutter image, then there's this thing that happens within some people where they say, well, then I've got to go change that, and I've got to become what these other people are showing me that I am supposed to become. And it does lead to anxiety, and it does lead to depression. Now, this idea of body dysmorphic disorder, I think it is quite interesting in an article from the Mayo Clinic that it defines it as a mental health disorder. In other words, an individual who focuses so much on their body and nitpicks their body to the point that it consumes them and that it makes them unhappy no matter what they do. They look at themselves. They're not happy with themselves. They're not happy the way they look at it. The Mayo Clinic says that the issue is not a physical thing. The issue is a mental thing. And I think that's quite interesting because individuals who are so critical of themselves, they could lose a bunch of weight. They could lift a bunch of weights. They could join CrossFit. They could join any number of exercise programs. But the problem is they're going to continue to look at themselves in a critical manner no matter what they do to improve their physical health. When it is a mental issue, that means that I will still find reasons to not be happy with myself. That's what this is getting at, and that's where the dilemma of our body image and an unhealthy body image versus a healthy body image come into play. This article would go on to say it's a mental disorder which you can't stop thinking about one or more perceived defects or flaws in your appearance. A flaw that appears minor or can't be seen by others. You dwell on it, right? And you become so embarrassed and ashamed and anxious that you might actually avoid social situations if that part of your body can't not be covered up or hidden, is what it says. When you have body dysmorphic disorder, you intensely focus on your appearance and body image, repeatedly checking the mirror, grooming, or seeking reassurance, sometimes for hours each day. And your perceived flaw and the repetitive behaviors cause you significant distress and impact your ability to function in your daily life. Now, some of you may be saying, well, Joe, how do I know if I have this body dysmorphic disorder? I mean, after all, I comb my hair and I want to make sure that I look presentable. And what I want you to hear today is this: that is not what this is. This is not, hey, I've put on a little weight, I need to lose some weight. Or, I think I'm going to go to the gym again, and because I really like to get those biceps back to what they used to be back during my college days, right? Or maybe a young teenager's watching this saying, as I grow, I want to make sure I'm healthy. So I'm not going to eat all the stuff, the junk food that everybody else is eating, and I'm going to exercise more and sleep more, says no teen ever, right? But the idea behind that is this: you wanting to take care of your physical health is not this disorder. When it becomes this disorder is when it becomes a preoccupation that you cannot escape the negative criticism of your body, and it impacts your life. Now, here's this particular Mayo Clinic article said that signs and symptoms of body dysmorphic disorder include this: being extremely preoccupied with a perceived flaw in appearance that to others can't be seen or appears minor. Goes on to say that strong belief that a symptom is a strong belief that you have a defect in your appearance that makes you ugly or deformed, or a belief that others take special notice of your appearance in a negative way or mock you. In other words, you just perceive that everybody else is seeing it. Now, look, I've been a teenager, and I'm in the process, Aaron and I, of raising 2 teenagers, almost a third one, and almost a fourth one. That's how blessed we are. We're not that... I guess we are that old. But anyhow, the idea is this: we've been blessed to have these young people in our life. And the reality is this: I think that part of that is growing up, where teenagers believe that they are on a stage. When they walk into a room, they believe that everybody's looking at them and everybody's taking notice of them, which is why if they are very shy, it can be overwhelming. The truth of the matter is, most people aren't looking at you as closely as you think they are. That's just a reality of life. Now, I know that just smacks some of you in the face, right? Because perhaps you're thinking, no, when I walk in the room, everybody's noticing everything about me. I hate to be the one that tells you this, but the majority of the people you think are looking at you in detail, they're not. That's just because that's the way it works. They may notice you came in the room, but they are not as detailed oriented about you as you might think they are. And that's because we are aware of our insecurities. And because we're aware of our insecurities, we think that they're so big that other people will see them too. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't even matter if you're me. That's just the way that we are, right? Because all of us see things about ourselves that we'd like to change. The secret is, don't become preoccupied to the point that it damages your daily living because you're so critical of yourself. It'll go on to say other symptoms are this: that you engage in behaviors aimed at fixing or hiding the perceived flaw that are difficult to resist or control, such as frequently checking the mirror, grooming, or skin picking, attempting to hide perceived flaws with styling, makeup, or clothes. Another one is constantly comparing your appearance with others. Another, frequently seeking reassurance about your appearance from others. Another, having perfectionist tendencies. Another, seeking cosmetic procedures with little satisfaction. And another, avoiding social situations. In other words, all of those point to an unhealthy view of oneself. Now, I told you that during puberty, that could actually become a serious issue for teenagers. And it is. It is. And part of that is because for the beginning of their life, they understood their bodies, at least to the extent that younger children can. But now all these things are changing. My hormones are changing. My thought process is changing. My body is changing. And I'm not sure about it. And not only am I not sure about it, but now I'm really concerned that what's happening is going to draw attention to me. And then I compare that with other people's bodies, and that makes me feel bad about mine. Right? That's why this is a big issue for teenagers. It's a big issue because it can lead to other things, right? When an individual has a negative body image regarding themselves, self-body image, it could lead to low self-esteem. And low self-esteem can lead to all kinds of behaviors to make ourselves feel better about ourselves, but it's all a fabrication. The issue is not what I do or even what I look like. The issue is up in my mind, how do I perceive myself? So until that's fixed, this other stuff is never going to be addressed. It's like treating a cough when you really have pneumonia, right? Now, individuals with negative body image also could experience depression. They could experience eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia. And the idea is this: they actually could overeat, not undereat or make themselves purge, but they could overeat as a way of compensating and dealing with depression. So there are a lot of different side effects, and it's not just those. Individuals who exercise all the time, as much as I would love to tell you that they don't have a body image problem, the reality is that exists even with those who are hyper into exercise. And the reason that can exist is because as they exercise, they know what part of their bodies they want to target. And if they don't get the results, then it bothers them, and therefore they think it bothers everybody else. But even though you and I may look at them and say, well, you exercise all the time, you're skinny, what's the problem? The problem is not in the body. The problem is in the mind. That's where all of this comes back. The problem is in perception. And so when you and I think about unhealthy body image, I want to remind you of a few things. And I pray that it's a benefit to you as adults. I pray it's a benefit to you as teenagers. I pray that those parents who maybe your children are growing up and you're helping them develop healthy body image concepts, I want to bring you back to a few things. Number one is this: there's a difference between taking care of yourself and having a negative body image. Those are two different things. And here's the reality. There are many people who perhaps would say, I don't have a body image problem, because they end up saying, well, I just want to take care of myself. Taking care of yourself is not the problem. The problem is this: in the mind. Why are you doing it? How do you see yourself? Are you always critical of yourself? Does it consume you? Does it play into your habits? Do you ever stay in because you don't like how you look? And I'm not just talking like my clothes aren't ironed. I'm talking you could put on anything and it doesn't matter what's going on. You would always feel bad about yourself. That's another category than I'm just taking care of myself, right? And that's where the Mayo Clinic says this is a mental health disorder. And so how do you deal with that? Well, obviously there are counseling. There is counseling that can help. And so if that's where you are as an adult, I would encourage you to consider that, because here's why. Because according to the Mayo Clinic, and I would agree with this, and I want to point us to some more important biblical concepts here in a moment, but here's the reality. You set the example in your home. If you have a bad body image, a self-body image, and you struggle with that, then it is possible that your children will see your example, or even that you will impose your own insecurities on other people. And therefore you teach that you're supposed to be critical about this stuff. You teach that whatever you wear is never good enough, and that you're always going to find reason to have a problem with the way you look, and it's going to consume you. And the reality is this, that you set the pace in your home, adults. So you've got to be the good example. Show that there's a difference of taking care of oneself versus being consumed with defects, because your children will pick that up. Another thing it says is this: use positive language. It's very dangerous when you start praising. Okay, listen now, because I want you to hear me say this. It's dangerous when you start praising your children based upon looks. Because here's why. When you don't praise them, what are they supposed to conclude? Well, it could be the same as a wife and a husband, right? When she gets all dolled up and the husband really dotes on her and tells her how beautiful she is and how amazing she looks, but then maybe the next time she gets dressed up to go out, he doesn't do the same thing. What might she conclude? She might conclude, well, I'm not as pretty as I once was, or he doesn't find me as attractive. And the reality is that the language you use can actually play into the way people perceive themselves. And so the positive language to say, oh, honey, that you are so beautiful, or I like the way you did your hair, or that dress looks so pretty on you, or to your son, you look really sharp. You looks like such a respectful young man. That's not bad. But what this particular point brings out is, and I don't disagree with it, what about praising other aspects of your spouse or of your children? What about praising who they are? What about praising the way they care? What about praising their empathy? What about praising their servitude? What about praising their character? You really showed great integrity in that moment, son. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for choosing to do what was hard, but to do what was right. Right, so now when I start praising those various aspects, my child or my spouse is not put into a single box when it comes to, well, if he compliments me, I know I'm good, but he only compliments me here, so these other things must not be as significant. You see, that is an unintended consequence of only focusing on the physical in your family. That's why I will tell you this. You've got to be careful as you continue to process this yourself, as you help your spouse, as you help your children, because the way you talk about things and the way you praise can actually play into the way they see themselves and what they actually develop, right? Another thing it brings about is this, parents, especially for you got to start talking to your kids about what happens during puberty. I know your parents may not have ever talked to you about it, but the reality is this. If you don't talk to your kids, they're going to find out on their own, or worse yet, they're going to think something is wrong with them because they don't know what's going on and why. It's always better to be proactive than to be reactive. Now, I would say be proactive in an appropriate manner, appropriate to the age, appropriate to the sensitivity of your particular child. But the reality is this, you've got to tell them. Look, as you go through puberty, your body's going to put on more body fat. That's normal. That's normal because your body's no longer a little child's body. It's becoming a grown woman's body. Or to the boy, hey, look, you're going to change. There's going to be changes that you'll notice in your body. They're going to be, I don't want to go into detail because I don't know all who's listening to this, but the reality is there are going to be changes, right? Your voice is going to change. Your body is going to start changing in multiple ways. You might become insecure. It might be painful, but the reality is this, that if you don't talk to them about it, who's going to? You can actually help offset some of the negativity by talking about it in a very God-honoring, normal way. So I would just tell you that, there's other things that are brought out here. One of them is monitor social media use. And obviously with Meta's research coming out with Facebook and Instagram and the impact that has on self-image, especially of girls, I would offer this to you. If you are a parent who allows unrestricted access, then you need to change that. If you are a teenager who believes that you're going to rise above this and it's not going to have any impact on you, may I kindly tell you, you are playing with fire, and that's not in your best interest. So those are some things that Mayo Clinic brings out. But what about God's Word? Because obviously we want to talk about body image from God's Word and in a spiritual aspect. So here's what I want you to understand about this. Three scriptures that I want you to understand. Number one is this: God doesn't look at you the way you look at yourself or you look at other people. And I get that from a standpoint when we come to understand here that Samuel is going to Bethlehem. He's going to anoint David to become king. But the problem is David is the least of his brothers. He's the youngest, right? And you've heard this before. You know this. And so what happens is from oldest to youngest, it appears they parade before Samuel. Samuel starts to look and says, surely this is the one, right? This has got to be the one. And in verse 7 of 1 Samuel chapter 16, the Bible says, but the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or at the height of his stature, because I have rejected him, for God sees not as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Here's the reality. If you have an extra body weight on you today, I'm not suggesting that maybe there's not some physical reasons, health reasons that you and I might need to pay attention to dealing with that. But what I want you to understand is this, that just because you have extra weight on you doesn't mean that you are separated from God and he all of a sudden says, oh, you're a sinner. It's not the case any more than the individual who perhaps doesn't get enough sleep at night, right? And they're taking care of their body because they're not getting enough sleep, or individuals who don't drink enough water according to standards, right? So the reality is this: we've got these charts that tell everybody where they're supposed to be that are man-made, and oftentimes they are medical-made, but they're also insurance-made. And so we get this idea that if I don't fit the cookie cutter, even that the insurance company says I'm supposed to fit, then therefore I'm not healthy. I would offer this to you. Different bodies are different bodies. And that doesn't mean that because one may have less fat on it, one may have more muscle mass than the other. It doesn't mean that that's a spiritual condition. Now, can it be? Absolutely. Can an individual who is overweight have a spiritual condition that is reflected in being overweight? Yeah. Can an individual who has very little body fat and a lot of muscle also have a spiritual condition that is reflected in his body? Absolutely. Because either one of those reflect a deeper issue. They could reflect a deeper issue, right? But I want to tell you this, it doesn't mean it has to. So here's what I want you to understand. This isn't about, your outward appearance not revealing something. This is about God paying attention to what's going on the inside. God wanting to be more specific of what's going on at your heart, but not your mushy-gushy feel-good concept. The idea of the root and the seat of who you are. You see, because point number 2 is this, that when you really start to look at how God made you, regardless of what your physique is, regardless of your baldness, regardless of how much hair you've lost, how much gray is there, how many wrinkles are there, or whatever you're struggling with going through puberty, Psalm 139 and verse 14 makes it very clear where the Bible says, I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. Here's the reality. You are a work of God. Mankind is a work of God. He designed you. And the psalmist said that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. In other words, God didn't mess up. Now, look, I've always been a big guy, and that's not to say that I couldn't stand to lose a pound or 2 or 10, right? But the truth of the matter is this: I'm not built like some real thin men who run marathons. That's just not who I am. My body's not designed that way. And I learned this very clearly when I was going through college, my undergraduate degree being in science. And part of that was I did want to become an orthopedic surgeon. And I had the opportunity to study human anatomy and physiology and kinesiology, and had the opportunity to dissect human bodies, at least portions of human bodies, and to study the human body very well. And here's what I came to understand, and they wanted to impress this upon us. Everyone's ligaments don't always attach at the same angle. Everyone's tendons don't always attach at the same angle. Some of them are looser. Some of them are not as loose. Some of them are tighter. Somebody may say, well, I just don't have the same level of flexibility. You're right, you don't, because your body isn't made the exact same way. Somebody may come into the room and say, my shoulders are broad, therefore I have to be fitted with a particular size, not because necessarily I'm overweight, but because I'm broad, whereas somebody else may come in and may not have quite the broad shoulders and the broad chest. You look at that and you say, well, Joe, I get that, right? So if you get that, then understand this. That's not by accident. So the very things that you look at and say, oh, well, that's just so bad it consumes me, I want you to understand, number 1, God doesn't look at you the way you look at you, but number 2, God didn't mess up. He made you beautifully, and he made you wonderfully, and he made you who he wanted you to be. So here's the deal then. Where are we supposed to land? Well, where we're supposed to land is an understanding. That understanding is this, that the outward adornment is not where I put my main focus. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 3 and following. Your adornment must not be merely external, braiding the hair and wearing gold jewelry or putting on dresses, but let it be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of God. And of course, that's a passage that deals with wives being in submission to their husbands, even if they, the husband, are disobedient to the word of God. Now, you and I may look at that and we would say, there's no way. And what God says is, yes, there is. And that is this: you be internally who you're supposed to be. And what you're going to discover is that that's going to be enough for God. And I promise you this, when you have that internal peace, when you have that understanding of the way God views you, you have that understanding of the fact that he didn't mess up when he made you, and that he really wants you to become adorned internally, more so than he wants you to become adorned externally, what you're going to come to find out is a very grown-up lesson, teenagers, and even some of us adults. And that is this: sometimes we focus on things that God doesn't focus on, and it causes us so much distress. It robs us of joy, it robs us of peace, and it can actually play with our minds. That's why I want to, impress upon you this evening that God's way really is better than your way. And I want to encourage you tonight as you think about that. Don't let this lesson slip you by. Spend time talking about it. If you struggle with it, spend time praying about it. If you need to seek counseling, then go seek counseling. But in no way, shape, or form continue to exist criticizing yourself and tearing yourself down, because I promise you, you will find more hope, more peace, more joy when you stop viewing yourself according to the lens of this world, and you start viewing yourself according to the lens of God. This evening, I want to thank you again for tuning in. I know the show's heavy, and we're going to end on the high note. The high note is this: I want to encourage you to visit us at KylePublications.org. There's no way to segue from that, but I do want to leave you with that thought, and that is this: as you continue to work through your relationship with God, the way you view yourself, it might be that at Kyle Publications you would find resources that would help you in that. We want to encourage you to do that. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, visit us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We want to invite you to join us there, and of course, check out the lightnetwork.tv. That's all that I have tonight. We're going to go ahead and transition. Y'all have a great evening. I would love to hear your feedback. Feel free to send me an email. Feel free to leave a message at the bottom of this video on Facebook. I would love to hear back from you. Y'all have a great evening.
Please hang up and try again.